Kathryn Kuhlman was 42 when she discovered that some tears aren't ours. It was Thursday night. She was alone in her room, as she had been every Thursday for the past 3 years. The same routine, the same time, the same spot in bed where the light from her table lamp cast a golden circle on the pages of her Bible. She opened to Psalm 91. She began to read in a low voice, as she had done since she was a child. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High. And then it happened again. The tears started. Before she even reached verse 4, before she felt any emotion, before any sad thought crossed her mind, it was as if something inside her knew what was coming, as if her body was responding to a signal her conscious mind couldn't grasp. Have you ever felt that? Your body reacting before your mind understands why. Kathryn tried to stop crying. She couldn't. The tears came from a place she didn't recognize, a place that wasn't hers. And it was in that moment that she realized something that would change everything. The tears didn't fall when she read other psalms. They didn't fall when she prayed the Lord's Prayer. They didn't fall when she sang hymns she'd loved since childhood. They only fell with Psalm 91. Always. For 3 years, every Thursday, the same thing, the same verse, the same inexplicable tears. And Kathryn began to suspect she wasn't praying alone. Let me tell you what I discovered about this story. What nobody told you about what really happens when certain words meet certain souls. Because what Kathryn experienced isn't unique. It happens to more people than you imagine. And maybe it's already happened to you too. First, you need to understand who Kathryn was before those tears changed everything. She'd been a nurse for 20 years, practical, rational, the kind of person who solves problems with logic, not mysticism. Kathryn had faith, of course. She went to church on Sundays. She prayed before meals. She read the Bible when she felt the need. But she wasn't, how can I say, she wasn't the type of person who sees angels or has visions. She was grounded, concrete. That's why the tears bothered her so much. At first, she thought she was depressed. She made an appointment with a psychologist. She had tests done. Everything was normal. The psychologist even suggested she stop reading the psalm if it made her sad. But Kathryn wasn't sad when she cried. It was different. It was as if the tears came from a sadness that wasn't hers, a pain she carried, but that belonged to someone else. Do you know that feeling? Of carrying something that isn't yours, but that somehow has become yours? It was in the 4th month that Kathryn decided to investigate. She was a nurse. She was used to observing symptoms, identifying patterns, seeking diagnoses. If something strange was happening to her body, she needed to understand. She started writing everything down in a blue notebook she kept in her drawer. The exact time she read the psalm, how many verses she could read before the tears started, how long the crying lasted, how she felt before, during, and after. She even wrote down the weather, the phase of the moon, what she had eaten for dinner, any detail that could explain why her body reacted that way. And that's when she discovered the first strange pattern. The tears always started at verse 4. Always. He will cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you will find refuge. Always that verse. Never verse 3, never verse 5. As if there was something specific in those words that unlocked an emotional response she couldn't control. And there was something else, something she took months to realize. When the tears came, she felt as if someone was praying with her, as if an invisible voice whispered the words along with hers. But it wasn't her voice. It was the voice of someone who was desperate, someone who needed that protection more than anything in the world. And it was when Kathryn understood that she wasn't praying Psalm 91 alone that everything began to make sense. But for you to understand what she discovered, I need to tell you about something that Bible scholars rarely mention. Something that has existed for millennia, but that our Western minds have difficulty accepting. Some psalms are not just prayers. They are portals. I know how that sounds. I know your rational mind is resisting this idea. Mine did too when I first discovered it. It seems like something out of a movie, science fiction, cheap mysticism. But let me explain what I mean by portal. There are sacred texts that were written in moments of such despair, of such divine need, that how can I say? They pierce the veil between the physical and spiritual realms. They create openings, bridges, communication channels that transcend the normal laws of time and space. Psalm 91 is one of those texts. Think about the story behind this psalm. It wasn't written on a peaceful afternoon as a poetic exercise. It was written by someone who was literally running for their life. Someone surrounded by enemies. Someone who needed God to appear, or they would die. Each word was forged in urgency. Each verse was born of absolute despair. And when you pray these words, especially when your own life is in danger, you connect with all the others who have ever prayed the same words in the same situation. You enter a current of supplication that spans centuries, a spiritual frequency that connects all the souls who have ever cried out for divine protection. Kathryn didn't know this when she started crying. She only knew that something bigger was happening. But in the 6th month, she had an experience that changed everything. It was Thursday, as always. She opened the Bible to Psalm 91. She began to read. The tears came at verse 4, as always. But this time, when she reached verse 15, something different happened. He will call to me, and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will deliver him and honor him. When Kathryn read those words, she heard a voice. Not with her ears. It wasn't an audible voice, but she heard it, clear as if someone was whispering in her ear. The voice said, "Thank you for praying for me." And in that moment, Kathryn understood. The tears weren't hers. They were from someone who was praying the same psalm at the same time, somewhere in the world. Someone who was in real danger. Someone who desperately needed the protection the psalm promised. Somehow, Kathryn's prayer was connecting with this person's prayer, and her tears were the tears of someone who truly needed those words to survive. But there was still mystery. Who was this person? Where were they? Why did the connection always happen on Thursdays? And it was then that Kathryn Kuhlman decided to do something that would change her life forever. She decided to answer. The following Thursday, when she reached verse 15 and felt the presence of another person, Kathryn whispered, "I'm praying for you. You are not alone." And what happened next? Well, you need to hear this. Because what Kathryn discovered that night wasn't just about prayer. It was about how the spiritual world works in a way our rational minds could never understand. It was about how some people are chosen to carry the tears of others, how some prayers cross continents, how time and space mean nothing when it comes to souls in despair. And maybe you felt this too. Maybe you've cried reading a verse and didn't know why. Maybe you felt like you were praying for someone you didn't even know. Maybe you are a spiritual gateway channel. But let me tell you what happened, and Kathryn responded to that voice. Because what she discovered about who was on the other side of this connection will explain why some prayers have the power to transcend the impossible. And it will reveal something about yourself that you may never have realized. Kathryn waited. Silence filled the room, like water filling a glass. She could feel something shifting, as if the very air was becoming denser. And then the answer came, not as a voice this time, but as an image, like a movie playing in her mind. Kathryn saw a woman, young, perhaps in her 20s. She was in a dark place. It looked like a basement. There was the sound of bombs exploding in the distance. The woman was holding a Bible. Her hands were trembling. She was reading Psalm 91 in a low voice, trying not to make a noise. And she was crying exactly the same tears that Kathryn cried every Thursday. At that moment, Kathryn understood everything. She wasn't praying alone. She never had been. She was praying with someone who was literally running for their life. Someone for whom those words weren't just spiritual comfort. They were a matter of survival. And somehow, through a mystery that defies all logic, the prayers of the two connected. They crossed countries. They crossed cultures. They even crossed time. Because what Kathryn didn't know yet was that this connection didn't only happen on Thursdays. It happened exactly at the moment the other woman most needed to feel she wasn't alone. But how is this possible? How can two people who have never met cry the same tears, reading the same words? The answer lies in a truth about prayer that few know, in a specific characteristic of Psalm 91 that makes it different from any other text in the Bible, and in what happened in Kathryn's life after she discovered who was on the other side of that connection. Stop for a moment. Take a deep breath, because what I'm about to reveal will completely change your understanding of how the spiritual world really works. The woman Kathryn saw in the vision was named Amira. She lived in a besieged city in Syria, Aleppo, a city that was once prosperous, full of life, where children played in the streets and markets buzzed with the voices of merchants. Now it was a ghost town. Buildings destroyed, empty streets, entire families living in basements, hoping the next bomb wouldn't fall on their heads. Every Thursday night, when the bombings intensified, because Thursday was market day, and the attacks always increased on days of higher civilian movement. Amira went down to the basement with her Bible. It was an old Bible, inherited from her grandmother. The pages yellowed with age, some torn by the constant moves by the makeshift hiding places. But Psalm 91 was still whole, intact, and she prayed, whispering the words to avoid attracting attention, to avoid giving clues to the soldiers who sometimes roam the streets looking for those in hiding. Kathryn discovered this 6 months later, through a coincidence that wasn't a coincidence. A missionary friend posted a photo on social media. It was a group of Syrian refugees in a shelter, and in the corner of the photo, almost hidden, was Amira. Kathryn recognized the face immediately. It was impossible, but it was her. Through the missionaries' contacts, Kathryn managed to talk to Amira, and what she discovered broke all the rules of reality. Amira said that every Thursday, when she prayed Psalm 91, she felt a presence, someone praying with her, someone who made her feel less alone in the midst of chaos. "I always knew someone was helping me pray," Amira said. "On the hardest nights, when I thought I was going to die, I felt like a kind woman was holding my hand." The two never met in person. They lived on different continents. They spoke different languages, but somehow their prayers connected through a dimension that science cannot explain. And do you want to know the most impressive thing? When Amira finally managed to leave Syria and go to a safe place, Kathryn's tears stopped completely. Kathryn tried to pray Psalm 91 on the following Thursdays. Nothing. No tears, no presence. It was as if the connection had been switched off at the exact moment it was no longer needed. That makes you think, doesn't it? About how many times you felt like praying for someone without knowing why. How many times inexplicable sadness has overcome you. How many times you've cried reading the Bible and didn't understand the reason. Maybe you weren't praying alone either. But Kathryn's story taught me something even deeper about Psalm 91, something that few pastors mention in pulpits. This psalm is not just a prayer of protection. It's a spiritual emergency call. Think of it this way. When you dial 911, you're asking for immediate help. When you pray Psalm 91 in real despair, you're dialing heaven's emergency number. And sometimes, God answers by connecting your prayer with someone else's. Creating a network of intercession that transcends the impossible. Kathryn discovered she wasn't the only one. Through research, conversations with pastors, and contacts with missionaries around the world, she found other people who had similar experiences. A man in Sao Paulo who cried reading Psalm 23, not knowing he was praying along with an orphaned boy in Kenya who had lost his parents in a drought, and repeated, "The Lord is my shepherd," every night before bed. A woman in Canada feeling presences while reading Psalm 121 later discovered she was connected to a single mother in Brazil who climbed the favela hill every day, praying, "I lift up my eyes to the hills," seeking protection for her children on their way to school. A teenager in Korea experiencing visions while reading Psalm 139 was spiritually linked to an elderly woman in Israel, praying against loneliness, repeating, "You have searched me, Lord, and you know me," in a nursing home where no one else visited her. Each story revealed the same pattern. Sensitive individuals connected to those in desperate need through specific biblical texts at moments of utter vulnerability. There's an invisible network of people praying for one another without knowing, a spiritual internet connecting souls in need with souls willing to carry the burdens of others. A divine system of intercession that operates beyond our understanding. And Kathryn Kuhlman realized she'd been chosen to be a part of this network. But why her? Why not someone else? The answer came in a revelation that completely changed her understanding of life's purpose. Kathryn discovered that people who become prayer bridges have specific characteristics. They've experienced traumas that made them more sensitive to the suffering of others. In Kathryn's case, it was the loss of her daughter at 5 years old, 20 years prior, a pain she carried silently, but which had made her able to recognize despair at frequencies others couldn't perceive. Her ability to cry Amira's tears stemmed from having cried her own unconsolable tears. God doesn't waste pain. He transforms it into bridges. And perhaps your pain, the one you carry and don't understand why it still hurts, is exactly what qualifies you to be a bridge for someone else. Perhaps your inexplicable tears are borrowed tears. Perhaps your sudden sadness is another person's heart beating to the rhythm of yours. After Kathryn understood this, she began to pray differently. Every Thursday, at the same time, she still opened the Bible. But now she didn't just pray Psalm 91. She prayed to be connected with whoever needed her. And the connections returned, not always with tears, sometimes with inexplicable peace. Sometimes with joy that came from nowhere. Sometimes with a sudden strength she knew wasn't her own. Kathryn became aware of her role as a bridge, and that changed everything in her life. She began to understand that we carry each other in ways we never imagined. That our prayers don't get stuck on the ceiling of our rooms. They travel. They find who needs them. They cross walls, oceans, cultures, and even time. And that some people are chosen to be spiritual antennas, receivers of others' anguish, transmitters of divine hope. But here's the most incredible part of this whole story. 3 years after the tears began, Kathryn received a letter. It arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. The mailman delivered it along with the usual bills, but Kathryn knew immediately that this letter was different. The envelope was simple, inexpensive, with an international stamp. The address was handwritten, with the careful script of someone unaccustomed to writing in English. It was from Amira, written in broken English, but full of gratitude. Each word carefully chosen, as if she knew this letter carried the weight of years of silent connection. "Dear unknown woman who prayed with me," the letter said. "I don't know your name, but I know you saved me. I know there's a woman somewhere in the world who cried my tears when I no longer had the strength to cry alone. In the darkest moments, when the bombs fell so close I felt the ground tremble beneath my feet, I felt someone holding my hand through prayer. Someone crying with me. Someone loving me without knowing me. There were nights when I wanted to give up, to stop praying, to stop believing. But then I felt your presence. I felt that someone on the other side of the world was sustaining me with prayers I couldn't say myself. Today I have a new family, a safe home, a new life in Canada. My children go to school without fear. We sleep at night without the sound of bombs. But I'll never forget the woman who cried my tears when I needed to feel I wasn't abandoned by God. Kathryn cried reading that letter. But this time, she knew exactly where the tears came from. They came from the gratitude of having been used by God in a way she never imagined possible, of having discovered that her sensitivity wasn't weakness, it was a superpower, of understanding that her inexplicable tears had an eternal purpose, and of knowing that there's a dimension of prayer that goes far beyond asking things of God. There's the dimension of being a channel of God for other people. Now let me ask you a question that could change your life. Have you ever felt the urge to pray for someone without knowing who? Have you ever cried while reading the Bible without understanding why? Have you ever experienced inexplicable sadness you couldn't pinpoint the origin of? Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night wanting to pray for a situation you didn't even know what it was? What if I told you that's not a coincidence? That it's not emotional imbalance, nor excessive sensitivity, nor spiritual weakness? What if I told you that you might be being invited into the same network that Kathryn discovered? That your inexplicable tears could be exactly the answer someone is praying to receive? That your emotions could be the channel God is using to reach someone on the other side of the world, feeling completely abandoned? From today on, when you feel emotions you can't explain, consider a different possibility. Maybe it's not your emotion. Maybe it's your heart being lent to carry what someone else can't carry alone. Maybe it's your soul being used as a bridge to bring hope to someone who has lost all hope. Maybe you are a spiritual antenna, a divine receiver, a channel of mercy. Maybe your tears have an address, and the person on the other side is waiting to feel that someone in the world cares enough to cry with them, even without knowing them. Psalm 91 is still there. People in despair are still praying at this very moment in besieged cities, in hospitals, in prisons, in empty rooms around the world. The bridges are still needed. The channels still need to be open. The question is, are you willing to find out if you're one of them? Because maybe, just maybe, your next inexplicable tears will be the beginning of the most incredible discovery of your life. The revelation that you matter more to God's plan than you ever imagined. That your sensitivity isn't a flaw, it's a calling. That your emotions might be exactly what someone is praying to feel. And that sometimes, being used by God means weeping tears that aren't your own, carrying burdens that aren't your own, loving people you'll never meet, but whom God knows perfectly. It's a profound understanding, a connection to something larger, something beyond yourself. It's the humbling realization that your heart, your very being, is a vessel, a conduit for divine grace, a channel for God's immeasurable love to flow through, to touch others, to heal, to comfort. This isn't just about personal faith. It's about becoming a part of something infinitely bigger, something sacred, something truly awe-inspiring. It's about understanding that your capacity for empathy, for compassion, for sorrow, is not a weakness, but a powerful gift. A gift that God can use in ways you might never fully comprehend. It's about embracing the mystery, the sacred dance between your human experience and the divine. It's about surrendering to the unexpected, allowing yourself to be a channel, to be a vessel for God's love, to be an instrument of His grace, even if it means shedding tears you didn't know you possessed, even if it means carrying pain that isn't solely your own. There's a deeper purpose, a higher calling, and it begins with the simple acknowledgement of your own profound worth in God's eyes, and the understanding that your feelings are not merely your own, but they are part of a grander symphony of faith, a divine orchestra playing out across the tapestry of human experience. Kathryn Kuhlman understood this deeply. She experienced it firsthand in the profound and sometimes overwhelming ways God chooses to work. She felt the weight of the world, the joy and the sorrow, and somehow she channeled it. She transformed it. She became a conduit, a living testament to the power of prayer and the boundless love of God. It's a journey, a calling, a profound and humbling truth, one that continues to resonate with those who seek a deeper connection with the divine.